take a seat. In our continuum of progress and solutions, I'm bringing you the great Juliet Davenport. Let me introduce this properly. I don't know if you have this, but I have to keep putting my glasses on and off.
I've got very focals.
Oh, yeah, that's what I need. So I went poke myself in the eye. Okay, so we're talking about delivering clean tech innovation now as we move deep into the solutions. You will know Juliet, I'm sure, but she's best known as founder and former chief executive officer of Good Energy, setting and driving its mission to power a greener, cleaner future together with its customers. So Juliet has basically been an innovator for over 20 years, working on ideas to fight climate change and transform the energy sector for the better. Awarded an OBE for services to renewables, Juliet remains passionate about creating a business that does good, one that can deliver the needs of society in a purposeful way, using business as the driving engine. So I know it's really weird when you're sitting there and I'm talking about you, but Juliet now advises various businesses involved in the energy transition, including BMD Renewables, Stand EH1 Energy Tech Hub, by the way, Solivus, Abatable, Gravitricity, Connected Curb, Atreto On-Site Energy, and she's also a commissioner at Crown Estate. So a really fascinating portfolio of stuff that you're doing. Let's just talk a little bit and do draw on all of your experience, because you've got such vast experience. You've been heavily involved in the UK innovation scene for clean tech for a long time, as we've established. How would you categorise it at the moment? What's its reputation globally? And what is the sort of global picture that you're playing into?
Yeah, so I think one of the things we forget is how brilliant the UK is at innovation. So I think we're in the top 3 globally as an economy in terms of the amount of innovation we do, the amount of investment we do in innovation. But one of my experiences is I get to work with some amazing companies, BMD, innovation in large scale heat pump technologies, Solivus, lightweight solar, lots of different areas. But one of the things that we really struggle on is that we have fantastic stats around innovation investment and the real technology progression, but we don't have the growth companies. So we're not very good at taking it out of the innovation patch and actually making these companies fly.
And is that acknowledged sort of globally? Does that form our reputation? So, do people sort of, I don't know how many people sit around and discuss the UK, but it must come up in this sector, and they're saying, oh, they're good at innovation, but they're rubbish at, this next stage.
Well, I'm not sure whether the US and the rest of Europe sit around, God, look at UK. Just not making enough of it. But there's definitely some fantastic reports. I think there's a recent one by Cambridge University that goes into a lot of this and really showing how we spend nearly 3% of our GDP on innovation investment in the UK. Amazing. We have world leading environmental science, but we're not taking it to the next step. And every time I'm working with small companies, it is really hard, that growth step, because either they get in big capital investment and they can't grow to keep up with it, or there's no investment at all. So they kind of, it's feast or famine, basically.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about those small companies. So the UK was once called a nation of shopkeepers. It's actually a nation of SMEs, isn't it?
It is.
And why is this our superpower? And why has it been overlooked? And because what we tend to do is cede power to big entities.
Completely. So I think what's really interesting is when you talk to government feels very comfortable talking to large organisations. I think possibly because they mimic themselves. They look much more similar in the sense of the way they work and operate. But 61% of our workforce works for small and medium-sized enterprise, more than anywhere else in Europe. Nearly 55% or something of our revenue in the UK comes from small and medium-sized enterprises. So we are immensely good at this. We have this diversity out there, but we haven't really managed to figure out how to engage in government policy around that.
Okay, when we spoke a couple of days ago, not just before when we talked about the Taylor Swift concert that you went to, which we don't have time to get into. The innovation scaling hole, that's what we decided, that we'd identified this gap, or you've identified this gap. What is it, and how is it scuppering our chances of getting to net zero?
So actually, I think a sinkhole would probably be better describing it.
Yeah.
So you can imagine a load of little boats. They're all small and medium-sized enterprises with great technologies and innovations, and they're trying to navigate around this massive whirlpool that kind of wants to bring them down. And I think part of that is related to the way we invest. So quite often you see investors really take a bet. So that what they're hoping is 1 in 10 of the investments they make it. And that means 9 companies that may actually be amazing, but just in a slightly smaller way, are let go, don't succeed, or go and do something else. And I think we need to think about how do we make sure that that whirlpool is slightly smaller. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't have efficiency and companies can't fail, but let's try and get more sort of carry on sailing for a longer period of time. And I think we'll have more opportunity to create growth companies.
Can we talk about procurement?
Yes.
I like to talk about procurement. How do we procure or approach procurement like innovation scaling winners? Like how do we change this, and what would it look like?
So when you think of procurement, when you think of individual companies, so one is Gravitricity. Gravitricity has a very particular hydrogen storage solution. But the thing is, when you're installing hydrogen storage, you're not just installing hydrogen storage. You're doing maybe ammonia production or alongside solar production. So actually, you're thinking about the whole system. And the storage is only one small part of it. So when people are thinking of procuring a whole system, they need to be thinking about, well, how can they bring in innovation elements to that system and insist that that's part of it? One of the things we did with the Crown Estate is we brought in a new technology actually funded by something called British Growth Fund, which is an innovation in air conditioning. So it's much more comfortable, it's much slower air movement, much lower energy and much easier to fit and retrofit. And they've now spec'd that into what they want in their buildings. So although they're not procuring it directly, they've spec'd it into the spec for other people to procure. And I think it's so important because that will really push innovation in some of these companies.
Yeah, absolutely. So that needs policy as well, though, or could benefit from policy. All of this could, presumably. What needs to happen in policy terms now? And what is your wish list for whoever is lucky enough to be in power come July the 5th?
So I think that there's a few things. I think the first thing is to look, we have a whole taxation system around our investment structures, whether it's a REIT, which doesn't pay corporation tax, or whether it's EIS or SEIS investment. I think we need to take an overview look of that and say, how do we make sure that we're crowding in funding to the companies, those growth companies we're really looking for? And how do we make sure that we're actually looking at areas like infrastructure, construction, which is what we're going to need in the UK, but also externally as well. So if we want to export, we need to be moving in those areas. I think the other areas we need to think about training. So I think about nearly 50% of students graduate are in STEM subjects, but the majority of them go into the medical sector, which is fine, but we're not having enough in engineering and construction and all the areas that net zero are going to need. So we need to really think, how are we going to incentivize students to come into our sector and really take that forward? And then I think that the last part we touched on today in various areas is thinking about supply chain. So how are we going to make sure that larger companies are incentivized through their reporting or through their investment as well to really think through the supply chain, bring in innovation and decarbonize?
Okay, you make some brilliant points. I'm really interested in what you say about education as well, because the STEM problem, if you like, has been around for a long time.
Yes.
You know, so it's still something that we really need some sort of breakthroughs on it. Any ideas of something that we could do
Well, I think what's interesting about STEM for me is that we still, in some of the universities, some are beginning to move. We still see very traditional subjects and single subjects. And a lot of students are now looking for multiple subjects. They don't just want to do engineering. They might want to do engineering and management. Maybe even engineering and marketing would be good, you know. So you start to bring these courses through that appeal to a wider range of people and actually are more designed for people who want to go into the workforce that we need.
Actually, some of our panelists earlier were talking about that in our first session this morning. Kim from RSPB was saying she just saw an advert for interdisciplinary courses on the way in. I think that was for AI and ethics and all sorts of things. And we were talking about the difference when we did renewable energy degrees and masters in the past. A component was always you had to spend 40% of your course learning about combustion science.
Yes.
Yes. So these things are changing.
Yes.
And maybe it's we need to have these conversations more openly as well, so people know what's going on.
Completely. And I think the concept of ethics in any engineering course, really important. Concept of communication, concept of marketing, all those areas so powerful and makes the courses more interesting as well.
Totally. And let me just ask you a final question. What do you decide to back? Like, how do you decide where to put your formidable energies?
So I tend to look at companies that need that step up from... So quite often what you have is you have companies that are very engineering focused or very innovation focused or quite sales focused, and they haven't done that next step, which is all about sort of bringing structure in, thinking about what structure the organization needs, but also reporting and sort of that day in, day out relentlessness to move towards success. And that's where I quite enjoy getting involved, is kind of taking it from the stage, taking it through the growth stage, actually, really re-engineering a company to understand, okay, this is what it now needs to be if it's going to be successful.
Well, you always make it sound very, very exciting, and it's always such a pleasure to get to talk to you. I wish we had longer, but we don't. I think that's the reset that we all need this morning anyway, so I hope you enjoyed that as much as I do. Now, Juliet have you brought some copies of your book?
I have
Yes.
20 copies.
Oh my God, there's going to be a stampede. 20 copies of her book, The Green Startup, and they're free to good homes?
They are free to good homes.
Come on. You're going to be at the BMD stand, EH1 Energy Tech Hub.
Yes, right next to the Energy Tech Hub, and next to my friends Ripple Energy and Solivus as well. Are all in the same area, so it'll be fun.
It's a community, you know, Reset Connect. This is all about the connection. I'm sure, would you take some questions there too, if anyone's got questions?
Yeah, I'm really happy to take some questions there as well.
Okay. Round of applause for Juliet. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed that. Free to go. Thank you.